Watch this video to the end for free advice. You may be in debt, or want to help someone who is in debt. An individual voluntary arrangement is not the only solution to your debt problems. At least 30% fail, and there are other ways that may fit your personal circumstances. Watch this BBC report about a real person's experience and how it didn't work for him.
Practical ways in which you can deal with debt problems, but the most important thing is to get the right advice, because if you get lumbered with the wrong advice, well, it could end up costing you.
It was a gradual process, like I think for a lot of people. I was on low income and the credit card was a means to an end.
Just over 4 years ago, the pressure of making ends meet meant that Aaron Lemert from Kent began to fall into debt.
You have every intention to pay every month to pay that bill back, but obviously the amount I was on, I wasn't paying the full amount back, so this amount was just building and building. A lot of it was going in interest. The debt wasn't really coming down, and that was my biggest concern.
At the time, Aaron had moved back in with his parents, helping to care for them alongside his job as a full-time carer. But his income wasn't enough to manage his debts, and in early 2020, the worry became too much to bear.
My debt amount in its entirety was about $26,000, which for me, on the salary that I'm on, was a horrendous amount. I could never ever pay that back.
So we went online looking for a solution and came across a debt management firm which recommended something called an IVA, or Individual Voluntary Arrangement. It hands control of all your debts to a single company, which negotiates repayment terms with your creditors, stops interest being added, and calls off any bailiffs that might have been instructed to pursue you. In turn, you pay that company a fixed, affordable monthly fee.
When you have a debt, you feel so alone. You don't know where to turn. So, yes, I did feel like, okay, this person, there's a way out. He's going to help me.
Under the arrangement, Aaron's creditors would accept about a third of the money they were owed in order to settle the whole debt. Aaron agreed to pay £150 every month for 5 years, with the insolvency firm taking £3,650 of the total in fees.
The relief was instant, to be honest. So speaking to someone that's telling me that you can get your debt paid up in 5 years.
But while the stress of his debts had eased, Aaron's home life became harder. Having recently lost his father to cancer, in November 2021, his mum's health took a turn for the worse.
I was about to go to work and I had a call really early, suddenly get up hospital. Your mum's, you haven't got long, basically. So I rushed up there because I'm near the hospital, and I got there first, and I held her hand. I held her hand while she died.
Months later, Aaron and his siblings sold their parents' home, and Aaron inherited £140,000. He thought he was now in a position to clear his debts once and for all.
I knew that I could move forward. I could pay my debts off and start my life, and maybe, start looking for a house.
But the insolvency firm had news for him. It was now entitled to 15% of his inheritance, £21,000, and all on top of the debts and fees included in the original IVA.
It just seems crazy. They're already taking their cut, and this is a 15% on top of that, just because they can. I tried to clarify and understand what was happening here, and I said to them clearly on the phone, "Are you taking 15% of my inheritance?" And she clearly said yes. So I said, "Thank you very much," and I ended the call. I had no more comments to say about it.
Aaron went straight to the terms and conditions, where he found what's commonly known as the windfall clause.
Where additional assets are to be realised, the supervisor will be entitled to 15% of those further realisations in addition to the total cost. I was feeling fuming, to be honest. I was really angry.
But windfall clauses aren't just limited to an inheritance. Some, including Aaron's, even entitle the insolvency firm to a cut of overtime, bonuses and commission. But that's just one of the reasons IVAs can be so lucrative for insolvency firms. They can typically generate £3,000 or £4,000 in fees, which have to be paid alongside the debt. But if someone struggles to keep up their monthly payments, the IVA can fail, and the customer can lose everything they've already paid in fees, while still having most of their debt to repay. Because IVAs generate substantial fees for the providers, debt experts and organisations, including Citizens Advice, are concerned that people are being signed up to them without the alternatives being properly considered.
Hi, through Step Change, I understand you've got some issues with your debts.
Debt charity Step Change recommends IVAs as a debt solution in less than 2% of the cases it deals with. Kerry Betts is one of its dedicated IVA specialists.
Our job at the IVA department is to determine whether that is the right thing for the client. Whilst they may feel it is affordable now, we're conscious of the rising cost of utilities and other costs of living. And we do try to dig a little deeper into whether that is going to be sustainable for a year, 2 years or 5 years. We would not put somebody forward for an IVA if we didn't feel it was the right solution, and we are very happy to end phone calls with alternative debt advice that is available.
That advice could include debt consolidation, debt management plans or other solutions, which could prove to be much cheaper than an IVA. Last year, more than 81,000 IVAs were set up. They typically have a lifespan of 5 years. But of the IVAs that should have completed in 2021, almost a third failed before then. And there was every chance the debts incurred were never cleared. Aaron says he now sorely regrets not understanding the terms and conditions when he signed up.
I want people to know that if they're in a situation and they need to do an IVA, to ensure that they read through the contract, even if it's got a load of babble, just sit and read each clause and make sure the windfall clause is not in there.
Well, of course, so many people are worried now about debt, and that was a very sad case to me anyway. And we tried to contact the insolvency firm behind Aaron's IVA, but we didn't hear back. So joining us live in the studio today is Rachel Beddoe from Citizens Advice. Now, Rachel, I'm going to be honest and say I didn't know what an IVA was. I'm sure a lot of people watching didn't either. So I always like to get the full thing. Individual Voluntary Arrangements. Is the bottom line that people have to really understand what exactly they're getting themselves into if they are in debt?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what we see so often at Citizens Advice is people who, like in the story, you know, initially were relieved to feel they'd got a grip on their situation, but then realise very quickly that they're really struggling to keep up with the repayments they've been signed up to. They don't realise that they're paying a huge amount of fees. And then, as we heard, in a third of cases, their IVAs end up failing and they lose all that money that they lost in fees. You know, we saw someone who'd paid £4,000 and then when it failed, found out she barely touched her debts at all. It was all gone in fees.
So you're left with all the debt still and you're just paying
exactly.
fees. I think maybe you've got to get into your head that it's repayment, it's not debt clearance.
Yeah, exactly. And there are other options available. I mean, this is what is so heartbreaking. A lot of the people that we see in unaffordable IVAs would have been eligible, for example, for a debt relief order, which is write-off, where you don't have the repayments. But by the time we see them, they're already locked into these plans.
So let's just recap. So if an IVA fails, what next?
So if you can't keep up with your repayments and your IVA fails, then what you need to do is seek advice. And it may be then that you start again with something like a debt relief order. But obviously at that point, you've lost the money and fees. You've lost the time when, you know, you just want to get back on your feet. Of course you do.
Now we come to the regulation, because as I understand it, part of IVAs is just not controlled, and that's a worry to you.
It really is. I mean, IVAs are big business, you know.
How big?
With every completed IVA will generate between £3,000 or £4,000 in fees for the providers that set it up, and they keep those fees even if the IVA fails. Now, what we're really concerned about is, unlike other types of debt advice, the advice given to people when they go into IVAs isn't regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, and it's their job to make sure people get good advice, that they understand their options. And we really think, given the amount of money in this industry, given the number of people who don't seem to be able to cope with their IVAs, this really needs to be looked at.
You see, we're all about trying to save money this week. That's what the programme is all about. So advice to somebody to say, if you are in debt,
How can you save money by going to a better option than IVA?
So certainly, you know, if you're worried about debt, and we know a lot of people are right now, do seek out advice. But yeah, it's good to think about the fees that are charged across the whole of a product. So something like bankruptcy or debt relief order, even though there's upfront fees, that is less than what you'll pay across the whole of an IVA. But the big thing I would say is anyone who's worried, get advice as soon as possible.
That is good advice coming from you. And the whole thing is that you can save a lot of money by getting the right companies. So that's worthwhile remembering.
Absolutely. You know, get that advice, understand your options, understand what is the right solution for you that you're going to be able to cope with in practice, and get advice for that.
Rachel, I'm glad to know that you're 6 months pregnant, so the best of luck with your
Thank
baby.
you.
So lovely. Thank you for joining us. Now, we put a lot of those criticisms to the Insolvency Practitioners Association, and it pointed out that the work of each insolvency practitioner is governed by legislation and is subject to what it calls comprehensive regulatory oversight. Now, it says it provides a regulation scheme for the largest providers of personal debt solutions, and in particular targets the quality of advice given to clients. But it acknowledged that this level of oversight is not industry-wide, and it voiced its own concerns about some debt advice firms steering people towards an IVA when cheaper and quicker debt solutions might be available. It stressed that anyone considering an IVA should make sure that they fully understand the costs and the commitment required to complete it, and that people should only enter into one if they believe that it is the best option to repay their debts. So now we join Angela for more questions.
I remember the years before my bankruptcy I was doing really well. I had a good regular income and I was getting offers from various credit card companies through the post nearly every week. They would just send me a card with my name on. I just had to ring them and activate it, then I could spend the money on anything I wanted. Not only that, when I became close to my limit on any of my cards, they would automatically increase my credit limit. The credit card company were just interested in collecting the minimum payment every month, so over time my core debt mounted. I always thought I could handle it, but like thousands of other people I had fallen into the credit card trap, buy now and pay off, sometime in the future. I had 8 cards with a total credit availability of around £60,000, and that was a lot more than I made in a year, so it was pretty crazy. Then life threw me a curved ball and my income dropped, so rather than change my lifestyle, I just started to live off my cards. Gradually my debt mounted, and I started to struggle to pay the monthly minimum payment, and I started to do the credit card shuffle, moving cash from one card to another. After 2 months the credit cards stopped me from taking cash. I guess they knew what I was doing. I looked at organizing an individual voluntary arrangement. But when I told a friend about my plan, he just said what would I do if things got worse in a year or two, and I just couldn't pay the monthly payment. He said you would have no choice but to become bankrupt, so it could be better to bite the bullet and get a fresh start now rather than struggle with monthly payments that can last up to 5 years. Only you can make the decision. Personally, I don't want to use credit cards again. The industry should be regulated a lot more, but this is the world we live in. They want to collect the interest monthly and keep you in debt as long as possible. The interest is high to cover the bad debt they get. For example, in 2021, 110,022 people took personal bankruptcy. But the profit in 2022 for the IVA industry is estimated to have generated around £13.5 billion in the UK alone. So credit cards and IVA businesses still make huge profits from creating misery and stress for thousands of people. I hope my experience will help you come to the right decision. If you need help and advice, please contact Clean Slate. They provide free advice as they are a not-for-profit company. But if you can make a donation, please do, and they can help